Stormtracker 16, Cloud to Ground, is sponsored by DraftKings Casino, your new home of Lightning Link.
Hi, I'm Stormtracker 16 Chief Meteorologist Kurt Aaron. Thanks for joining us again this week for another Cloud to Ground. You know, the dog days of summer are here. These kids back here are loving it, but we have a serious question given to our very own Joe Snedeker about heat survival. Here's Joe.
Hi folks, and welcome to the Lightning Round where we answer your questions. And I got Zoe here because we have a colleague who has something that's in this question. Hey, we're in peak car baking sun season. Do the sunshade things people put in their windshield actually work? Travis wants to know. You use these things.
I do.
And you're busy. You have to go to work now.
I do.
But we're going to see if these things really work by examining the evidence. But one final question for you. Do you think it works?
It works okay.
Okay, what does okay mean? All right, here's the deal. So, a lot of folks don't understand the basics between, why this thing called the greenhouse effect actually even works and why the car heats up inside. So here's the deal. I hate to bore you with too much science, but the sunlight that passes through your window in your car is made up of not only visible light, but infrared, ultraviolet, radio waves. All that energy goes through the windshield, hits the upholstery, the car, the plastic, the carpeting, and then that stuff inside gives off a new form of radiation called infrared. So visible light passes in, but guess what the infrared does when the inside of your car heats up? That can't pass through glass. It gets stuck in there, and that's why the inside of your car heats up. Light through, infrared gets stuck. So what happens if you block the actual light from getting into your car? That means no visible light is getting in, which means the infrared never gets sourced and can't get blocked because there is none. So these things actually do work, and they keep your car generally about 10, 20 degrees cooler, and the surface is a lot cooler too. But here's one thing you have to realize. The sun arcs in the sky from east to west. So if your car is parked facing south, it will block the sun. But what if you park your car, say, north-south, east-west, in an orientation that still allows the sun to come through other windows? Well, then it's not doing anything. So this must be facing south so that it'll block the sun as it arcs in the sky. Otherwise, you're still heating up through the window, heating the upholstery, visible in, infrared trapped, and it defeats the whole purpose. But these sunscreens, I don't know. To me, it's a real pain in the butt to get this thing out and stretch it out. And for all that for 10, 20 degrees. Zoe, you're nuts! I wouldn't worry about it. What's 10, 20 degrees? And then you have to park oriented to the north-south. It's too much trouble. As a matter of fact, you don't want to do this either because the sun will reflect and cause skin cancer on your face. Keep radiation out of your life. And keep your questions coming. weather@WNEP.com. Peace out.
Thank you, Joe. Good advice. And of course, you remember we've talked before about just how hot it can get on the interior of your car, not only for people, but for pets. So we don't want to leave them in cars where there's no air conditioning, especially on days like this. Hi, and welcome back to PAWCAST. I'm Chief Meteorologist Kurt Aaron. All right, now, we got a question coming from my granddaughter, Mia. We talked about it briefly last week. If you don't remember, here it is.
Hi, I'm Mia. My question is, why is it bad to leave your pet in the car during the summer months?
That's a great question because, on TV, I'm always talking about how it's too hot to trot, too hot to take your dogs out. When temperatures reach 85 or above, especially on concrete, asphalt, and blacktop, they can get much hotter. I'll show you more on that in just a second. But what about temperatures like this? It's not bad out here. What are the current temperatures? Let's go on the severe weather set and find out. Let's go. Okay, here's a quick snapshot of where all our temperatures are right now. Some spots, as I like to use the term, toasty. Some spots a little more toasty. Look at Stillwater, 87. And New Milford is at 79. So we were just outside the sunshine. It's beautiful. We love afternoons like this. But remember, when we start getting above 85 degrees, and this is what I was talking about outside, too hot to trot, this is what the asphalt concrete can feel like, and blacktop can feel even hotter. Our limit right there, this is where we start seeing caution. And that's around 85 degrees. But Mia's question was not about walking, it was about being on the inside of a car. And did you know the threshold for that is a lot lower? Check it out. You never want to leave a dog, pet, child in the car. The threshold for that starts at 70 degrees, not at 85, 70. So just how warm can it get? So after 10 minutes at 70 degrees, it can feel like it's 90 degrees inside the car. After just 20 minutes, almost 100 degrees. And then look at this, at 70 outside temperature, it can feel like 104 after 30 minutes. That's why you can never leave your pets in the car, children as well. You don't want to do that, especially in the summertime. All right, so let's bump this up. 60 minutes feels like 112, but let's say the temperatures that are outside right now are between 80 and 85 degrees, most of the area. So here's at 80. After 10 minutes, it feels like 99, 20 minutes, 109, 30 minutes, feels like 114 inside that car. And then after 60 minutes, feels like 123. And then let's say we go to 90. Watch this, 10 minutes, just 10 minutes. Because remember, we just showed you there were spots currently right now that are close to 90 degrees. So after 10 minutes, feels like 109. After 20 minutes, 119. 30 minutes, feels like 124. And then after an hour, 133 degrees. So again, pets can be harmed if you leave them in the car when the temperature is starting at 70 degrees. Keep that in mind. That's different than walking. 70 degrees. We want you and your pets to stay safe. Now, let's talk about next week's science class question. Here it is.
How do you know what is going on in the sky at night?
That's a great question. We'll have answers to that in science class next week. And again, be safe out there. Thanks for watching. Hope you learned something. And keep those pets out of cars parked in the summertime. Take care. Of course, we just want you to be safe. Enjoy the summer weather while it's here, as these folks are enjoying this in the park as well. Coming up in just a little bit, our very own Anthony Bordenero and the whiteboard. Stay with us.
Stormtracker 16, Cloud to Ground, is sponsored by DraftKings Casino, your new home of Lightning Link.
Welcome back to Cloud to Ground. I'm Chief Meteorologist Kurt Aaron. Anthony is on his whiteboard and he's tackling the question of what are the forces in play when it comes to fronts. We talk about fronts a lot. Take it away, Anthony.
Have you ever seen a cold front, a warm front on a map and wondered what the heck is that? Well, we'll answer that on this edition of Whiteboard Weather. We're going to give you the basics on what you need to know and what to tell your friends, and maybe take away a thing or two. So the origin of the word front actually goes back to World War I, where there was a college, the Bjerknes College, and basically wanted to describe the collision of air masses like a battlefront. That's what they had on their mind. And yeah, it's basically all it is about the collision of air masses. Now, what's an air mass? So when you have the globe, 70% of it's covered in water, about 30% is covered in land, and over land, it's drier, and we call that continental air. And hopefully I spell this right. Continental, sorry, Michigan. We're out to right over you a little bit. And the next we talk about is air over water. It's a little more humid. We call that maritime. So we'll use a little. Something could be dry, something could be moist, something could also be warm, and something could also be cool. So further to the south, you have tropical, what we call tropical air masses. So towards the Gulf, this is tropical, not necessarily moist, but warm. And then further off towards the north, you have polar air masses. Now, let's blend them. You can get maritime polar air masses, cool air that's over water. You can get continental tropical air, warm air that's over land, and you can get any blend of the two. So yeah, that's basically what it is. And now there are divides between the cooler air, the warmer air, and that's all it is. So we'll flip from the front of the whiteboard to the back of the whiteboard. And let's talk more about these fronts. Now, there are 5 main types of fronts. Again, we're only going to get into 2 or 3 in this episode of Whiteboard Weather. You have cold fronts. If you see them on a map, they are drawn like this. And wherever side these little figures are, that is the way that the front is moving. So in this scenario, it's moving from northwest to southeast. Warm fronts usually move south to north, because usually the warmer air is further south, unless you're in the southern hemisphere, and then it's the opposite way. Then you have stationary fronts. Now, stationary fronts are unique in the fact that they don't really move. They do wobble a little bit. We call them stationary fronts because they definitely don't move as quick as the cold or warm fronts do. So we draw them. If you see it on a map like this, you see a bunch of these little blobs here, like this. And these little blobs here like this. Stationary fronts are very slow moving, and that could lead to prolonged periods of rainfall. Now, dry lines and occluded fronts, I'll show you what they look like, but we won't get that much into it. Dry lines look like this. And the key thing with dry lines is they separate moist air masses between dry air masses, where cold and warm fronts are about the temperature, dry lines are about the moisture, and then occluded fronts are a sign of weakening systems. And they look like this, if you've ever seen it on a map. We'll get more into this in a different edition of Whiteboard Weather, because that is a whole different evolution of a different system. So these are what the fronts look like. Now, we've shown you on this side what it looks like on a top-down point of view. But I want to show you what it looks like side to side, because it is very important. Something to understand is that polar air, cooler air, is more dense than warmer air, and that affects the shape of the front. So let's just say we're here in Pennsylvania in the Keystone State, and a warm front is trying to infiltrate our area, for lack of a better term, trying to invade. A warm front carrying in some of that warmer air, not necessarily tropical, more moist, but usually it is more moist air. And then let's just say a cold front is trying to push through too. We'll flip the whiteboard and show you what that looks like on a side-by-side. And by the way, it does take a skill to have 10 markers in the hand at the same time. So you have this very warm air mass right here. If the warm is trying to go to the cold, since warm air is less dense than cold air, it slopes like this. So here in Pennsylvania, let's say we're in Pennsylvania right here, Keystone State, you get this gradual sloping of warm air riding over the cool air. You get generally less uplift, less dramatic showers and thunderstorms. So this leads to, I'll draw the rain in red. This leads to generally lighter showers, but potentially more prolonged showers, rain showers that may last for an entire day, because this air keeps on wanting to rise, keeps on wanting to rise, and the cold air is kind of keeping it in its place. It's not allowing too much of that moisture to come in. So that is what it looks like. Now let's just say some cold air is trying to enter here in Pennsylvania. Now I flipped the direction so it makes a little bit more sense. So this is cold air trying to enter the warmer air here, and that front is a little bit more dramatic. It slopes like this. So the warm air is forced to rapidly rise over the fronts, and see how fast that's going? That leads to bigger clouds and more dramatic rain showers and thunderstorms. So that is the gist with fronts. So cold fronts are associated with more rapid rising motion and more prolonged showers and thunderstorms. And it basically, all the fronts do is provide lift, because warmer air is less dense than cooler air. So it allows that less dense air to ride over the cooler air, and that starts the atmospheric processes of condensation and then precipitation eventually when the cloud becomes heavy enough. So that is the gist with warm and cold fronts. Thanks for tuning into this edition of Whiteboard Weather. We'll see you next week.
You know, August has started pretty soggy. We've had a lot of rain, flash flood warnings, but our very own Allie Gallo has another August she remembers where we got drenched as well. That's coming up in just a little bit. Stay with us.
Stormtracker 16, Cloud to Ground, is sponsored by DraftKings Casino, your new home of Lightning Link.
You're looking at a beautiful small creek and stream, and these things can get treacherous if we see a lot of rain. And that's exactly what happened to us back in 2018. Our very own Allie Gallo tunes in her time machine to show you exactly what happened. Take it away, Allie.
Last weekend, a very slow-moving storm brought flooding rain to parts of northeastern and central PA. We received reports of more than 5 inches in spots, and several flash flood warnings were issued on the evening of Sunday, August 2nd. For some of you, this may be bringing back memories of a time not too long ago. This week is the 8th anniversary of the beginning of what was an incredibly wet month of August, what would later become several rounds of flash flooding, leading to major damage all over northeastern and central PA all month long. This week, I'm taking a look back at August 2018. It had already been a pretty rainy July that year. In fact, the Scranton area received nearly 3 inches of rain just during the week of Gojo in 2018. But then came August, and that rainy pattern did not change. On the morning of August 3rd, emergency officials in Bradford County woke up to calls about flash flooding in the area.
I braced myself. I'm like, what now can we possibly have in this county?
New Albany was one of the hardest hit areas in this round of flash flooding. The community library and even some homes took on feet of water.
I couldn't believe it. It was hard to believe so much water all of a sudden. Because they were just quick and it would just come just like that.
Here in Laceyville in Wyoming County, roads were closed because of creeks and streams overflowing their banks. In Lycoming County, Mill Creek poured over onto Route 87, closing a stretch of the road.
When you live along a stream, you have to expect it. You hope it doesn't happen, but you just got to be as best prepared as you can.
We knew this was going to happen. Maybe not today. Again, it's not if, it's when.
Not even a week later, the same part of Bradford County was once again hit hard. More than 3 inches of rain fell fast on the night of August 7th, 2018.
It was insane, actually. The water come on so quickly and stuff that we had 6 inches of water outside our house. It just broke my heart to see it. Just come so fast and there's nothing you can do. Try, hope, and pray you can get stuff covered up so it doesn't come into your house, but we didn't get that in time.
Days later on August 13th, this was what Interstate 81 near the River Street exit in Scranton looked like. There were delays for days even after the water receded because of how much damage was done to the shoulder from the flash flooding. That same day, this was Progress Avenue in downtown Pottsville.
Insane. I seen cars, water's up to the roof. I seen people in kayaks downtown, and people walking, kids are swimming. I mean, it's just crazy out there right now.
It's devastating. It's you can't explain it. I'm lost with words. It's just so bad.
Later in the month of August 2018, the community library in Bradford County that took on water in one round of flash flooding was washed away entirely in another round.
You get to the point where you don't know if you can take anymore.
I was in New Albany that week.
It's unreal what happened. I mean, you'd never expect it.
I remember meeting several people who said just the thought of rain in the forecast made them uneasy. Then Governor Tom Wolf even visited this part of Bradford County and told families he planned to find the money to help those affected by all of the devastation. And as always, when anything bad happens here in northeastern and central PA, so many stepped up for their neighbors. Here in Bloomsburg, a 73-year-old woman living alone had 6 feet of water in her home in one of those rounds of flash flooding. She got help from the Bloomsburg football team. In return, those boys got a new biggest fan.
They were here Friday for like 4 hours, and they were dragging stuff up. I mean, it was heavy, wet, dirty, muddy. They had to break walls down. Just indescribable. I mean, you can't even imagine how they came out here and just helped. And out of the goodness of their hearts.
To be able to help somebody, just gives you that real good feeling. Also, especially since somebody in the Bloomsburg community, that makes it extra special, since we all go to school here.
August 2018 is technically the second wettest on record for here in the Scranton area, with more than 10.5 inches of rain falling at the airport during the month of August. But of course, many places in northeastern and central Pennsylvania received more rain than that in August of 2018. Thanks for joining me this week. I'm Allie Gallo.
It's really incredible what Mother Nature can do. And we're going to keep an eye on this, of course, and we need to stay safe together, which is one of the reasons why we do Cloud to Ground, to inform you as to what's going on. Now, coming up in just a few minutes, our very own Jeremy Lewan will join us as he's looking up in that night sky.
Stormtracker 16, Cloud to Ground, is sponsored by DraftKings Casino, your new home of Lightning Link.
Welcome back to Cloud to Ground. Now, Jeremy Lewan loves to look up in the sky, as you know, whether it's during the day or at night. Today, he's answering the question, what are the wonders of a single-cell thunderstorm? You got to look up to see it. Jeremy has more.
Every week, the weather tells a story, and sometimes the best way to see that story is through your eyes. Welcome back to This Week in Weather, where your photos help tell the story of the skies above us. We take a look back at the past with photos sent in by viewers just like you, right here on the Plus. This time, I want to take a moment to dissect a photo sent in by Lewis from Granville Summit up in Bradford County. He got this great full view of a thunderstorm about 55 miles to the north in Binghamton. Now, what we're looking at here is a classic single-cell thunderstorm. At first glance, it's a beautiful scene. A towering cloud rises against the sky, bright white where the sun catches it, darker underneath where the rain is falling. Some of those hues are even pinkish, thanks to the fact that we have a nearby sunset occurring too, as the cloud surfaces are being illuminated. But every part of this cloud tells something about what's happening inside the storm. Starting at the bottom, if the trees weren't in the way, you would be able to see that it's relatively flat. That's the level where rising warm moist air cools enough for water vapor to condense into a cloud. That's got a name in meteorology. It's called the LCL, or lifted condensation level. A dark, well-defined base like this often signals a strong, moisture-rich updraft feeding the storm. Above that is the towering cumulus portion of the cloud. Let me show you that here. This is where the updraft is at its strongest, carrying warm air rapidly upward. The taller and more vertical the cloud becomes, the stronger that rising motion is. And that's one of the first clues that the thunderstorm is intensifying. Now, near the top, notice how the cloud begins to spread outward into the familiar anvil shape. That's because the storm has either reached the EL, or equilibrium level, that's the name of it in meteorology. That's where the updraft is no longer buoyant compared to the air around it, or it's reached the tropopause, which is a boundary layer between the troposphere, where most weather occurs, and the stratosphere. The atmosphere becomes much more stable at the tropopause, and that's why the droplets start to spread out there. The air can no longer rise efficiently, so it spreads out horizontally, and then this broad, crisp anvil tells us that the storm has grown deep in the atmosphere, often reaching heights of 40,000 feet or more. And sometimes times, if that updraft is especially powerful, you'll see this. Now let me show you this full screen because it's worth seeing. You can even see the cloud push above the anvil into an overshooting top, which you can see here in Lewis's picture. It's almost like a little hat on the top of the cloud. It's a classic sign that the storm is capable of producing severe weather, including large hail, damaging winds, and frequent lightning. Even though a single cell thunderstorm usually has a relatively short life, lasting around 30 to 60 minutes, it still can pack quite a punch while it's at its strongest. So the next time you spot one of these towering clouds on the horizon, remember you're looking at the atmosphere story written from the ground all the way up to the tropopause, the edge of the sky even. And that's the storm that could be headed your way. That's why it's important to look at radar like the one we have on our WNEP app to analyze storm dynamics. And before we go, let's take a look at this week's photo that made me smile. I'm going to take us down to Luzerne County right here. This one came in from Rob in West Wyoming as the first light of day crested the horizon. Brilliant orange rays spilling through the towering pine trees, painting his backyard in warm golden light. The beams seemed to stretch effortlessly between the branches, creating one of those fleeting moments that almost feels magical. It's a beautiful reminder that even the same atmosphere capable of producing those building, towering thunderstorms can also create moments of incredible peace and beauty like this. And that's a look back at this week in weather, told through your lens in moments, colors, and skies right from where you are. Keep those photos coming because you never know, you might see your snapshot featured right here next week. Can't wait to see what you send in. I'm Jeremy Lewan.
Thank you, Jeremy. Great stuff. And I want to thank you for sending in the photos to the Photo Link Library. We really appreciate it. Makes a huge difference. We can share it with our other viewers. So thank you. Hope you learned something this week. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.